Well, I'm out at the farm today and messing around, kind of cleaning some stuff up and so forth. But I've got two tractors here. I thought I would show you the differences between them, and we'll get right into it. All right. What we have here is a 1951 TO30 Ferguson and a 1955 TO35. And, you know, when you just generally look at them, other than paint condition and color, they look about the same. And yeah, they are sort of kind of about the same. But there are some pretty major differences between a 30 and a 35. I'll start here on the 30. So this, in the United States at least, this was the second edition, if you will, of the TO series Ferguson Tractors. First one was a TO20. Primary differences with the 20 is engine size. You're in the lower 20s on the 20, in horsepower terms on the 20. You're about 30-ish, 32, something like that with the TO30, hence the name. So with the 30, you've got your differential braking is on either side. These two pedals are your differential braking, and then you have one brake lever that activates them both. A definite improvement over a Ford 2N, if you're familiar with those, where you had clutch and brake and then just the other brake. There was no way to hit them both at the same time and the clutch, or you had to be pretty dexterous to do that. Let's just say that. From a dimensional standpoint, these two tractors are about the same. A 35 weighs just a little bit more, not a ton, but mainly it's additional content that adds some pounds. They both have Continental engines. This is a 129 cubic inch engine. This is a 134. A TO35 runs about 36-ish horsepower, something like that. The green and gray, that was 54 and 55. That was the paint scheme they had. Prior to that, all the 20s and 30s were all gray. So there's lots of similarities, but there's a ton of differences. Tire size is effectively the same. The 35 I have happens to have the power adjustable variable tread wheels, PAVT. Those were optional on these tractors. You'll see a lot of 35s with the standard wheel setup, still very highly adjustable. Both axles, front axles, are the same exact casting. So no differences there, same capability, really same thing. But beyond that, there are a lot of differences. So if we start with, you know, bell housing, back to the back of the transmission, this entire casting on a 30 is completely different than a 35. And again, starting here at the bell housing, back to here. One of the primary differences is totally different transmission. You got three speeds in reverse, plus a high and low range with the 35. On a 30, all you have is 3 forward speeds in reverse. That's it. Okay. The other thing about it is totally different steering box. You can see this steering box, very similar to the 20, but it's and mine's leaking. But this steering box, entirely different unit. So this center section, totally different castings, completely different than the 30s. The rear end casting is also different. So if we look at where, you know, this transmission casting is longer on the 30, shorter on a 35, and then your gear pattern, so forth, is cast into the rear end housing here, and you're just totally different. One of the main mechanical differences is that a 35 has a ground speed PTO selection as well as your standard PTO. And that is a handy thing to have in a variety of circumstances. And if you saw my how to get a post hole digger unstuck, you'll understand one of the uses. Over here, though, on the 30, there isn't such a thing. So it's just it's either engine PTO or off, period. Okay, the other major difference is a 35, at least a deluxe version of a 35, has a live clutch and a 2-stage clutch. So what that means is I can stop the tractor and leave the PTO run. And on a 30, you're either everything stopped or not, period. So that's, in my view, a major, major improvement. The other thing about it is that given it's a live PTO, it just gives you a lot more flexibility. On a 30 or a 20, you're gonna see a lot of these, which is an overrunning clutch. The primary reason for that is that if I've got an implement on back and I wanna stop the tractor, and there's some momentum in the implement, without the overrunning clutch, the tractor will continue to move, presuming it's a forward gear, it'll continue to move forward. So that obviously could be thrill-inducing at points in time. With a live PTO, we don't have to worry about that. We can stop everything, disconnect everything from the drive line, and everything's stopped. So that's a major improvement that you get on a 35. The hydraulic top cover is also a completely different casting on a 30 than a 35. So really from here back, it's these tractors, while they look very much the same, they're not the same. Floorboards, though, are the same. Use the same one, as you can see. Now, the other major difference is in the hydraulic lift system. With a 30, you've got the Ferguson system, which is a draft control system. So you can raise your implement, lower your implement, and so forth. Wherever you set the lever will give you your draft depth. So let's say we have a moldboard plow on the back. Effectively, we're going to set our draft, probably adjust this so it just goes the same depth every time. We're going to set our draft, though, at a point where we're getting the depth we want and the tractor's able to pull it. And then what happens is, if I get into heavier ground and my wheels start to spin, it'll automatically lift the implement, give me more traction, and allow me to continue operation, so to speak. If I get into lighter ground, it'll allow the plow to go more deeply if it warrants it. But typically, it allows you to maintain the same depth regardless. Same way if you have some undulations in the ground, maintains the same implement working depth. Very innovative system, and really probably the most widely copied type system out there. Now, depth or the draft control, much different than what you would find on a current compact tractor. 90+% of the current compact tractors have a position control system. There is no draft control on them. And so there are some advantages of that. The one thing you don't have here is position control. So let's say I want to run a rotary cutter back there. I want to run it at the same height. Well, this has a very difficult time maintaining that consistent height if I don't have a draft implement on the back. And a cutter is not a draft implement. So the 35, in my opinion, one of the biggest advantages of 35 is that you get both. I have my draft control over here, and then my lever, my height lever. And you're going to see here, maybe you can see that position is stamped into this control. So if I'm in this area and I'm using my lever in this area, then I have position control. So I can, set, rotary cutter, for instance, 5 inches off the ground with my position control, it'll stay there. All right, it won't vary, it won't go up and down and so forth. Most of your modern compact tractors have position control. So you can set it in a spot, it'll stay in the spot no matter what, okay? However, if I get it down, up into the draft mode, and I'm gonna set my this is gonna lift for me, lift and lower. But I'm gonna set, once I get a draft implement back here, a moldboard, plow disc, something like that, then effectively what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna set the depth with this lever. This is my draft lever. And I'm gonna set it wherever I want it to be. And then when I push this down, it's just gonna go down to the point where my draft lever is set. So all I'm then doing is raising, lowering with this lever, and my draft control is what's gonna give me my implement depth. So in this case, I have the best of both worlds. I've got my draft control, which is fantastic for draft implements, and then my position control, which gives me the ability to more finely, to be able to frankly control non-draft implements. So that's, this new hydraulic system, along with the live clutch, in my opinion, make this tractor an entirely different animal, much more useful. Okay, so when, if you're thinking about, acquiring a tractor of this type for use, like around your place, you're going to do various things with it. These two on appearance-wise, what's the difference? In practical use, if I was going to choose one of these two tractors to actually use, rather than, if you're a collector, doesn't matter. They're both cool. Get whatever one you like. But if you're going to use it, the 35, far, far, far better tractor all the way around. You'll find it to be way more useful, way more user-friendly, all that kind of stuff. So, other differences with the 35, you get a tachometer. That's kind of nice. So you can know where you're running your 540 PTO, for instance. Oil pressure, temperature gauge, amp gauge, pretty standard stuff. To start it, you're going to turn the key on. There should be a button, which is missing on mine here. So you turn the key on, you hit the button. That's how you start it. On a 30, you don't get a tachometer. So you're going to run your implements by ear, which is not too difficult. It's about 75-80% of full throttle, roughly. You have a key, but to start it, you're going to notice down here, there's an S, okay? So basically what you're going to do is take it out of gear, pull your gear lever all the way over and push it forward. That's your starter switch. So kind of a unique methodology, but the one thing it does for you, you cannot have this tractor in gear and start it. It is impossible to start it normally with this tractor in gear. So that's frankly, it's a safety feature that I think makes a lot of sense. On a 35, they also have a safety feature, but in that case, you have to have your high-low gear shifter in S for start, or in neutral, really. So there's a neutral safety switch there. The tractor won't start unless the range is in neutral or S. Other differences, you notice that instead of having these separated turning brakes, that's gone. Now your over on, you have both brakes on both sides. You can link the brakes together with this lever. That's your brake lock there, which is a little nicer setup than on the 30. There is a brake lock on the 30, but these are easier to operate, in my opinion. Otherwise, when we get back to the back, fenders are basically the same, excepting you got your toolbox here in the fender on a 35. On a 30, it's up right in front of the gas tank under the hood, so your fenders are different. The rear end castings, from this angle are very, very similar. The draft control, this is where your top link is what controls your draft. Much heavier duty on a 35 than a 30, totally different unit there, and that's part of that hydraulic top cover difference. As far as the upper lift arms go, they're basically the same casting, same with your draft arms. Your link lift arms are all the same, pretty much. So other than that, seats, different, a little more bucket seat here, arguably more comfortable than the pan seat over here. Both of these seats will lift up, back, flip over, and so on. So if you want to stand, you can get your seat up out of the way on both of these tractors. And there's a lot of times if I'm on a tractor for quite a while, I do like to stand while I operate it. And I find that handy. Steering wheels, all that pretty much the same. Throttle control is different. Then you get to the hood. So in the 35, you've got these two buttons which open your center rack. That gets your access to your radiator, fuel tank, battery. A lot easier to do on a 30 or a 20, either way. There's a lever here, you switch, flip open, and you're gonna lift the hood. That's how you're gonna access your radiator, fuel, battery. The configuration of those things in both cases are about the same. Fuel tank's much different. You can see the little toolbox up here. So just a little more convenient and modern on the 35. Not that this is massively inconvenient, it's just different. Other than that, badging is slightly different on the two. Headlights are somewhat different on the two. Not really a ton. Chrome ring surrounds versus not. Other than that, they're pretty much the same units. Both of these came from the factory with 6-volt systems. This one, in my opinion, unfortunately, has been converted to a 12-volt unit, and as soon as I find a generator, I think I'm going to set it back to the way it originally was. No real problem, in my view. There's no real good reason to switch to a 12-volt system on these tractors. What I find happens most often is that somewhere along the line, a battery cable has been replaced, and they're replaced with too small of a cable. So if you have a 6-volt tractor, it's cranking slowly, and you have a new battery, or you have a good battery, check your cable size. They really need to be heavy cables. It makes all the difference in the world, and these tractors will start in any kind of weather on 6 volts, no problem. So I just, like I said, my preference is that they remain original, but I have what I have over here, and that's fine. But I've spent a lot of time on a Massey Ferguson, or a Ferguson 35. That's for sure. Back when I was way younger than I am today, the second tractor that I was put on after a Ford 2N was a 35. And I thought the 35 was just an absolute massive improvement. And it was. A lot more horsepower. Not quite double the horsepower of a Ford 2N, but the hydraulic system, high and low range transmission, all those things just transform this into a far more useful machine. In my opinion, the 30 is definitely a big improvement over a 2 or 9N Ford. Quite a bit more horsepower, and the differential braking's better. I think the hydraulic system's somewhat improved, not massively, but somewhat. So there you have it. That's kind of a quick review of the main differences between a TO30 and a TO35 Ferguson. Hope you like it. And if you do, give me a like and subscribe.